Today in Unit 5, we are going to focus on the ideas of nationalism and sectionalism. A lot of these concepts and ideas happened as our nation was developing economically very differently in an industrialized north and a plantation system, economic system in the south. So nationalism and sectionalism are kind of opposing concepts, and hopefully in today's lesson you can learn about those two concepts. As we go through today's lesson, please pause the video as you need to complete study guide notes, and it wouldn't be a bad idea to do a split screen option. In the early 1800s, the United States is starting to grow into its own. We had held our own against England in the War of 1812, and we had discussed those effects, including increased patriotism, optimism, and this desire to make America more manufactured based and to produce and manufacture its own goods so it's not so dependent upon imports from, say, England or France. So nationalism was one of those ideas that really started to take hold in the early 1800s, and this is a feeling of pride, loyalty, and protectiveness as a country. We see this in moments like the Olympics. We see a lot of nationalism. We also see this in moments of national crisis. Henry Clay is a congressman from Kentucky, and he is a strong supporter of nationalism. And we will learn about Henry Clay, important involvement in American history, especially with things like the Missouri Compromise. And in fact, Henry Clay is the person who our county, Clay County, is named after. And there you can see Henry Clay. He has lots of namesakes, but Clay County, being the county of our city of Liberty, is named after Henry Clay, not the clay soil. Another term is the American system. This is a plan President Madison presented to make the United States self-sufficient, part of the effects of the War of 1812 and kind of America coming of age and deciding to become more independent. The American System Plan by President Madison has three major parts. You'll want to put those in your study guide notes. The first part is to establish a protective tariff. A tariff is a tax on imported goods to make American products easier to buy. So imports, if you remember from earlier, are goods brought into a country. So a protective tariff would make those imports more expensive, more taxed, making the American-made products more tempting to buy. Also established a national bank. This part of the American system would allow allows there to be only one currency, kind of taking the systems Alexander Hamilton had set up under George Washington and setting up a national bank. And the final component of the American system is to improve the country's transportation system, build more roads, build canals. We see the Erie Canal started, and unifying our nation, not just as a nation, but for goods and products and news to go throughout, especially as our country will grow. James Monroe is the 5th President of the United States. He becomes president after James Madison. He won the 1816 election. He was also the negotiator of peace terms during the War of 1812, during Madison's presidency. And people began to become more convinced with their individual section, or concerned, with their individual section of a region than the nation as a whole. So we see this kind of sectionalism starting to occur during the presidency of James Monroe, more of a north versus south, east versus west. As our nation was growing, it wasn't necessarily all the same throughout our country. that sections of our country had particular economic systems, cultural systems that we start seeing dividing our country. So sectionalism is loyalty to the interests of your own region rather than to the nation as a whole. So a New Englander, for example, would be seeking the interests of New England, or a Southerner. And so we see sectionalism starting to grow as our nation grows, and this divide between what is best for the nation and what is best for your section or your part of the nation. Each time a new state is added to the United States, there's a big controversy about whether it will be a free state or a slave state. And we see this at its greatest divide in the controversy over our state, Missouri, whether Missouri should enter as a free state or a slave state. When Missouri is ready to enter as a state, there is much debate because Missouri has a number of slaves and yet is considered by some to be in the North. So the Missouri Compromise, Henry Clay was part of this process, in 1820 stated that Missouri would enter as a slave state, and Maine, which was previously part of Massachusetts, would enter as a free state. And slavery was to be banned north of the parallel 36 degrees, 30 minutes line. And I will show you on a map all of these components. So this is what the United States looks like in 1820. And we see in the light green are states where there's slavery. We see in the yellow color free states and territories. And we see unorganized territory. These are territories largely part of the Louisiana Purchase during Jefferson's time. And this is where we see Missouri. And as you can tell, Missouri is right here, kind of divided between, is it a northern state or is it a southern state? And what was decided is Missouri would be admitted as a slave state, but any future territory north of this line here, 36 degrees, 30 minutes, would be free territory, and south of the line could be slave territory. They thought this would solve future problems. You can predict that this will not solve future problems, especially as America expands into what is today Texas and Oklahoma. And so this is a band-aid. This is a temporary compromise or solution. This will not solve the slavery issue, and this will be one of the first causes of the Civil War, which will happen in about 40 years. And here's Maine, which was admitted as a free state, which would previously just been considered part of Massachusetts. The United States is also starting to flex its muscle a little with Europe and wants to put an end to the creation of colonies in North and South America. And we see the Monroe Doctrine. This is one of James Monroe's lasting legacies. States that the Americas are closed to colonization and the United States is a protector of Latin America. So this was our statement to European countries saying, do not come into North and South America and attempt future colonization. We are closed for colonization. And this is a big statement for the United States as a fairly young country who had been a European colony to make. And this is a political cartoon here showing the American with Latin Americans behind him saying no trespassing. And this is to indicate here the Atlantic Ocean and these European powers, France and England and these other Europe, Spain powers being told to keep off. This is our flag in 1820. If you would like to please now go to your textbook, there is a chart on page 383 that you should use to complete your study guide. There are factors that strengthened and weakened the United States listed in that chart, and so please take this time to do that. We will talk tomorrow more about the Monroe Doctrine, and we will simulate that. We will also talk about how the Missouri Compromise was a big deal from both the southern perspective and the northern perspective, and we'll analyze this map some more as well.